Welcome back to the A World of Difference podcast, everyone around the world that listens. We have a very exciting world traveler on the show today, Lisa Diver, who's also a diver, a scuba diver. Wasn't that fun? Your last name is Niver, but it rhymes with diver, and I just called you Diver.
That's okay. I love it.
Yeah. Tell us about you and why you love traveling around the world. How did that even start? What was your first trip? Did you grow up in the States and then just go overseas at some point? What was that like the first time you went?
I did grow up in Los Angeles. My dad served in the military. And so my sister was born in Georgia on the base. And then my parents moved us out to California. I grew up here, even though I was born in Boston. And so the feels like there was a little wanderlust in our family from the beginning, go west for no snow. And when we were in junior high, my parents took us on a cruise, and I saw the Parthenon in Athens. I saw the pyramids in Egypt. I was in Jerusalem at the Western Wall. And growing up, I just didn't think history seemed very interesting. I wasn't curious about it. And then when I was actually in the places, it felt like I had literally walked into my history book, and I was
Yeah.
completely hooked. I was like, wait, how did you guys make this boring? This is so cool.
Great question. I know all the homeschooling parents out there are cheering because this is what they do, especially my homeschooling parent friends who have kids that just travel around the world. I had a good friend in Singapore. She and her husband were both neuroscientists and stationed there for a couple years. And they literally, at the end of their 2 years, decided they were going to pull their kids out of international school, homeschool them for a year, and go around the world in a boat. And I was like, that's the coolest that's like boat school. Right.
The
History does
thing
come
is,
alive.
it's such great natural learning when you're traveling with kids, because you're constantly, how much is this money? What's the currency exchange? What time zone
Yeah.
do we need to be in to call grandma? Like, how many minutes is that? What do we have to do? And you're constantly thinking, like, let's find ourselves on the map. I mean, you can do that if you don't travel, if you live at home, you can draw a map from your house to grandma's house or Aunt Susie's house or whatever, but not everybody
Yeah.
does. But when you're traveling, you're constantly looking at a map and you're like, where am I?
Yeah. So true. Well, you have a podcast that has to do with a map. So tell us a little bit about your podcast.
So my podcast is called Make Your Own Map, and I loved having your friends Craig and Earl from The Good Road on with
Yes.
me. And it's been so fascinating, as you know, to have a podcast, to get to interview incredible people. I got to interview the ambassador from Ireland, and she was talking to me about being on the Security Council and how that's a once in a generation appointment, and how she
Wow.
was with the ambassador from the Ukraine on the night that Russia invaded, and they didn't know if his
What?
family was safe.
Oh my
And I just
gosh.
was so honored to be in her company. And it's been an incredible journey to hear what do other people do when they travel, and what makes other people's lives work, and what challenges have they overcome.
Yeah, I love podcasting. It's so much fun. It was a chance for me during COVID. I was a COVID podcast that lasted. It was a chance for me to connect with people when I just moved from Singapore to the Silicon Valley and was missing in-person people. And so I was like, I could just interview people that I know. And then it kind of was like, oh, I'll interview the authors of the books that I like. And then it just kind of grew from there. I love podcasting for that reason. But you also have written a book, and that's one of the main things we're going to talk about today. Tell us about your book. What was your driving force behind this decision to write, of all things, a memoir after your divorce? And you had these 50 challenges you wanted to do before 50. Tell us about the inspiration behind this book and kind of what's going on with all the things that you're writing in there that are deeply resonating with so many people that are listening right now. I know, because I know people have been divorced that listen to this. I know there's people approaching 50, and for women, that's like a whole thing. But for you to take the world on at that point, that's a really exciting premise for your book. So let us know about it.
Well, thank you so much. I'm very excited. So my memoir is called Bravish: One Breakup, 6 Continents, and Feeling Fearless After 50. And you're right, I did 50 challenges before I turned 50 after my divorce. And one of the things that's been very remarkable to me is I met a young woman Well, I thought she was very young. She's 29. Unfortunately, she felt very old. And she was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to meet you and hear about your 50 challenges." She's like, "Because I really was thinking that my life is over."
What?
And
Wow.
that's not been that uncommon. Like I thought that was going to be a one-off, like, "Oh, okay, whatever, that's your opinion of 29." But I've had a lot of 20 somethings say they feel this incredible pressure about 29 turning 30. I know for myself, I felt it a lot 39 turning 40. And
Mm.
about societal pressures about, are you going to be married? Are you going to have children? Have you ruined your life yet? And especially now, like you talked about in the COVID coaster and social media, there's so much pressure to be like everyone else and have the perfect picture. And I, for one, in this book, definitely talk about my marriage fell apart. It imploded. Things were terrible. I thought I was a failure. I thought I would never laugh again. I thought I would never travel again. I had really felt very hopeless.
Mm. Gosh, I can't imagine how devastating that was at that point in your life. I know I'm not 50 yet, but I'm getting close to it. And the women I talk to that turn 50, there's so much around that time. It seems like a very significant time in a woman's life, at least in Western culture. And
Hmm.
so for you to walk through divorce at that point, um, do you remember just what that was like? Do you write about that particular part in the book in a deep way? And if so, we want to camp out there a little bit on those feelings because I know that you face a transformation later. But I think sometimes when we skip over the hard, we don't appreciate the transformation as much. So, what were you feeling? What was your life like at that point?
Well, I did a lot of therapy, every kind of therapy that I could find. And I'm in Los Angeles, so there were a lot of kinds.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of crying. I explained to people that all I did was cry, but when I was writing the book, it became clear that that wasn't accurate. I did cry, but I was still quite functional. I was still running the website. I have a website, We Said Go Travel, and I was still making videos. But the thing that was my kind of touch point, and one of the therapists definitely said this to me, was, I know you're going to be okay because you're still funny. And so I kept talking about that I lived in crazy town, because if all you do is cry and you messed up every part of your life, you live in crazy town. And I was hoping to upgrade. I wanted to move to a new town called Sucksville. I was convinced that Sucksville was an upgrade. In
From
retrospect, I'm
Grace.
not sure which way is the upgrade, but one of my friends was having a hard time in her life. And the message she left me was, "I think I'm living in Sucksville adjacent."
Oh.
And I thought that was so interesting that this nonsense I had created for myself, that I was moving from one town to another, became really useful to my friend. That she was like, I'm not in Crazy Town. And I'm not really in Sucksville, but I'm Sucksville adjacent. Because we say that a lot in Los Angeles. People say they live in Beverly Hills adjacent.
Oh, that's so true. Oh my gosh. Well, as you're walking through all that wonderful therapy there in Los Angeles and up here in NorCal, we also have a lot of great therapy options. Thank you, California. You did have to overcome a lot of challenges. I mean, the thing about therapy is you still have to do the work. And so as you're overcoming these challenges, you're trying to reinvent yourself, at the same time. What was that like? And do you have any advice for people who are going through that kind of at the moment? They're listening.
Yes. Thank you for asking that. I think one of the things that is the most important and that saved me was that I have a lot of friends and long-term friends. And I remember talking over Skype or chat with a friend. She and I worked on the cruise ships together, so many many years ago. And she said to me, "Lisa, I don't understand. When did you stop scuba diving and dancing? You love that." And
Mm,
having someone reflect back to me what I had tangibly given up was very helpful, because I did actually go back to dance class and I planned a dive trip, and being able to do those things again that I loved, that I had given up during my marriage, really helped heal me. That
mm,
and for other people, maybe you didn't give something up, but maybe you could find something to love. That one of the things that I read a lot of books when I was separated and getting divorced. And one book said something about, you couldn't do something new in an old way. And to what I interpreted that as was you should do new things because they would never remember you. You know, like people say, "Oh, I walked past the restaurant where we always used to go and I was so sad." So, you know, if you go to a new restaurant, you don't have bad memories. I mean, you should figure that out, how to deal with that. But at
Yeah.
the same time, do something that's serving you in a positive way. Or, you know what? You love chocolate cake? Make chocolate cake, eat chocolate cake. I ate a lot of chocolate. That helped me.
Chocolate is the best. I really don't even trust people who don't like chocolate. I don't think they're human. I'm like, "Are you an alien? Because this is not you're not human. Every
But
human loves chocolate." So
But I think it's important, whatever that thing is for you, that's a treat for you. Like I remember in college, I did really well on a test and I bought myself a new plant, and that made me so happy I had the plant. And that was something, and I found that during my divorce, like something that's growing was very helpful. That, you know, you could
Hmm.
get a plant that's very hardy, like a cactus. People always tell me I kill plants. Get something that won't die.
Yeah.
Cactus or an orchid will last for a while. Or I think those things really help to remember and think about. You know, it can be hard when you're going through trauma yourself. Watching upsetting stories is not helpful, but something that takes care of you. Some people love to take a bath. Buy yourself fancy bath salts. Like there are small things that you could do that are not very expensive. You know, if you're in a place that has running water and a store, you can even learn to make your own bath salts. You know, like wherever you are, like if you're lucky enough to live somewhere where you can walk in a national park or go out on the water, I think that really is very healing. Also, I did a lot of walking.
Walking, oh my goodness. Walking is its own healing, and water is a special thing for me. It always has been. And it wasn't until the last year that I realized that being at the beach, it does really help your parasympathetic nervous system to calm. I mean, there's a reason we have a sound machine setting on these sound machines that's ocean waves, right? But also, even the blue color of the ocean can do something to you just visually. And there really is something so healing about water in general, but for me, the ocean specifically. I'm blessed also to be here in California. I'm 15 minutes from Santa Cruz, and we can go down there and just, the waves have really healed me, honestly, and a lot of what I've gone through. But you write in your book, and this is not easy to do, you write down some of the intimate parts of your marriage falling apart. And for people who've experienced their marriage falling apart, I just know that that's going to really help them feel seen because the details may be different, but sometimes that whole process can be quite similar, and even if the details are not the same. And so how did you do that? How were you able to write down some of those intimate details, and what were ways you cared for yourself in that process?
That's a really good question. And I think, like we talked about, people having a terrible boss or having a break with a sibling, all of those, there's a lot of different ways, or especially you mentioned COVID, that, you know, having a family member that you couldn't visit in the hospital, all of those things, all those kinds of trauma are things we have to heal from. And for me, writing about it, yes, that really did suck. A lot of times I would sit in my computer until I was so nauseous that I was fairly certain I was about to throw up, and then I would lie on the floor for a while. And one of my roommates from grad school started laughing when I told her that. I'm like, "Why are you laughing? I'm being very serious." She goes, "No, I know you. I know that's exactly what you did do." And I was like, I'm telling you, that's what I did." She goes, "Yeah, people aren't going to believe you, but I know you did that." So a friend of mine gave me a suggestion, which was very helpful, was to pick a talisman. I picked a necklace, but it could be a ring or a bracelet, whatever. And that when you're starting to do that writing work, you put it on, and
Hmm.
when you're finished, you take it off. And like to give yourself a signal, now we are functioning in the past, we're in these memories in this moment, and it's finite. And
Hmm.
sometimes I did sometimes light a candle when I was working. And you know, I that helped me think of, I have a favorite teacher who died, and the candle would remind me of her, and I would feel her presence. And I
Hmm.
a lot of therapy. I wrote the introduction chapter. I actually wrote part of it in the therapist's office with my therapist. Like I was like, "I
Wow.
cannot do this." And she's like, "What if you did it here with me? What if we talked about it?" I was like, "I hate all your suggestions, but I'll try it."
Wow. Well, thank your therapist for us because then we get this gift because you're able to do that hard work. And it's such hard work. I just thank you so much for writing this down because, you know, we've all been in these sort of psychologically unsafe or just emotionally unhealthy spaces. And really, there's just no shortcuts for walking through the pain, walking through the suffering and feeling through it to get to the other side. There's just really no substitute for that kind of hard work. And so, for those who are going through it or have gone through it, to be able to read your process, it's going to be its own healing for people. But you don't just stop there. You don't camp out forever in the hard feelings. And it's okay to have them even now because it's like a relationship that ends is going to be kind of a lifetime of grief in various ways, because that's how that kind of thing works. We're just human after all. But you did set this goal for yourself to accomplish 50 challenges before turning 50. So what what was the most significant of those challenges, do you think? And why do you think it was the most significant?
Thank you. One thing I just have to say about the trauma is I remember reading something Brene Brown wrote, that there's a difference between telling your story to your audience and working your story out on your audience. And
Mm,
I think I thought about that a lot, that you have to wait until you're actually in the space that you can share the story, that's you're not trying to traumatize other people.
right.
And I think about that. And so that kind of leads me into when you're asking, like, which of the challenges were kind of so challenging. As part of my divorce and part of my therapy, I finally got a proper diagnosis. I had always been told I was clumsy and I had a lot of accidents. And it turns out, in fact, I'm not clumsy. I had an eye problem.
Oh,
And
wow.
yes, so I worked with Dr. Alan Brodney. He's here in Los Angeles. He's amazing. And over time, as my eyes were teaming and working better, and I took tennis lessons, Dr. Brodney's like, I think this would be a really great idea. I said, I think that sounds terrible and frustrating. But I did do that. And then I got good enough at tennis that when I was in Aruba, I actually played beach tennis, which is so much harder.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But because you can't bounce, it's sand. And it turned out someone in my group was like a former NCAA tennis champ. I'm like, great, that's who I need to play tennis with.
What?
But it was really fun. That one of the things about all the challenges that I noticed about myself was my first instinct when I was given the opportunity to do something new or different. My first response was always emphatic that I was not going to try. And one of the
Mm.
things I noticed as more and more challenges came to me later, and I was more like, well, still sounds like a terrible idea, but I'll think about it. And now something comes up, and I was in New York for a conference, and they have this thing where you can walk on the outside of a skyscraper. And I was like, oh, yeah, I want to do that. I was like, who am I?
Wow. It's like you found a part of yourself that you didn't know was there. Did you not consider yourself to be adventurous for most of your life, kind of up until this point, or what was that journey like?
For a long time, even when I was working on the book, I didn't think that I was adventurous or athletic. And a friend of mine, a different friend from the cruise ship, I made a lot of friends. But my other friend said to me, what do you mean you're not athletic? Tell me what you did on your last 3 trips. I'm like, well, I went skiing in Utah and I went scuba diving in Mexico. And she goes, and what do you think athletes do? I'm like, oh, athletes play basketball and they do sports with balls and they're really talented. And she's like, yeah, we have a lot to work on. You're adventurous.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's funny, right? Sometimes we don't see ourselves in certain ways and we have these blind spots about ourselves and everybody else knows and we're the last to know. So, how did you come up with your list of 50 challenges?
That is such a good question. So the list was not, like some people have a bucket list. They have 100 things I'm going to do before I die, or they take a list from someone else. My list was very organic. Things were coming to me. I was a travel journalist, and once I got this idea that I would try new challenging things, when someone would approach me about a destination, a lot of times, there's things going on in the time 2017, everything was about craft beer and family travel. And I was like, yeah, besides that, what if you have that's more adventurous? And someone would offer me something and I'm like, oh no, that sounds not like me. And almost every single time the PR person would look at me and say, isn't that the point of your challenges? It's like, are you using my words against me? Because that does not make me happy. And I'm like, well, I think you might want to consider this great idea I'm offering you. So it was
Love it.
pretty organic. And then sometimes things led to one to another. Like I did a challenge. One of them was I raced BMWs. The BMW has 2 locations in the US where you can have lessons and race cars, and one's here in California in Thermal. And then because I had done that, other things came to me. Like you write about BMW, then someone else is like, hey, I think you love cars. Would you like to come to the auto show? And then because of that, I ended up going to the Formula E, the electric car race in Monaco. And
Wow.
one of the things that became clear when I was writing the book, not when it was happening, but in the writing, was you could start to see these lines of like, oh, well, if I'd never said yes to the BMW, I never would have gotten invited to the auto show, and I never would have gone to Monaco. And then because I was actually in Monaco was how I ended up racing a Lamborghini in Las Vegas.
Wow. So saying yes to one thing led to multiple other yeses. That's so interesting. And, some people go through just like, I don't know, the cliche of a midlife crisis.
Mm-hmm.
You went through the end of a marriage and actively chose to go do all these wild and crazy challenges. I'm wondering, what did your family of origin think? Were they surprised? Were they worried? Were they on their knees praying, lighting candles, and concerned?
That is a good question. So one of the books that I would really recommend to people, I know we talk a lot about a post-traumatic stress disorder, and that is a huge and significant issue for so many people. One book I read was called Super Survivors. And in that book, they talk about post-traumatic growth,
Hmm.
and that some people have this really big opportunity to change. And my family, they were very supportive. I mean, we had taken this cruise when we were younger, and then right now it's the 40th anniversary summer. I went to Israel when I was 15 with 150 other kids from Los Angeles. And
Wow.
that was the reason I studied in Israel in college. And that was the reason that I went to Club Med. Like there's another line there. And so my family knew that I had always loved traveling, and I went to summer camp every summer. I loved to get out and get away, and I loved to meet more people. Once my sister said to me, we knew that you needed more friends. We just didn't know it was this many more friends.
Such a sister thing to say. Oh my goodness. As you went all around the world doing all these challenges, what are some of the lessons that you took away that are kind of a part of you today?
So one of the things, I was very fortunate this year, I got to speak at the Travel and Adventure Show in 4 different cities. And one of the things I talked about there, which is I think one of the big takeaways, is that no matter where I've been, I'm a teacher by training, and everywhere I've been around the world, people talk about in the news, like those people are like that, or this country's like this. No matter where I've been, no matter what people have said about it, everywhere I've been in the world, parents want the same thing for their children. They want them to be happy, they want them to be healthy, and they want them to have more opportunities. And I think that's the thing I've taken away the most traveling to different places, is that we are much more alike than we are different. And that we need to show a little bit more kindness, and just take a pause and see if we could understand other people.
Wow, I can't agree more. Of all the places I've lived and traveled, that's one thing that always strikes me is not so much how different we are, although that's very obvious, especially in the beginning. It's really just that how much we're the same. That's really the whole point of why I started this podcast, is that there's a lot of different ways to live this human life, to be human. But at the end of the day, we have so much more in common. Our desire for family, our kids to do well, to be healthy, to be safe. A lot of those things are just common to humanity. And having worked in the tsunami relief in Indonesia, I know a lot of the nonprofits that would come in would talk about how resilient people are. That I agreed and I disagreed. I agreed because, yeah, we all have this ability to kind of bounce back and move forward. And the more collectivist our society is, the more we're going to pull together in a place like Indonesia. Um, And yet at some point there's also like disadvantages for people, like maybe, you know, women, especially under Sharia law. That was a whole different challenge, that women face different circumstances that men did. But you're this woman turning 50, um, suddenly single, and there's all kinds of terrible stereotypes around all those things, right? We have ageism that's really harder on women than it is on men. But your book is about this resilience as a female and your perseverance, even in the face of adversity. And so, what is your message to women who are walking through difficulties? And what have you learned in your process of resilience and overcoming what you've overcame?
There's a lot to unpack there in that question. First of all, I just have to say I feel so much for the people that were harmed in that tsunami. That was just, I mean, it is natural disasters. We just oddly in California, we had the first hurricane in 84 years. In the middle of it, we had an earthquake. So we
The
have a new
hurricane.
word, hurricane.
Yeah, right.
And I guess one of the things thinking about natural disasters and resilience and my life is I do think a lot, you know, growing up knowing about earthquakes, and then I went to college in Philadelphia, and very early on when I was in Philly there was Hurricane Gloria, and I had never been in a
Mhm.
hurricane, and there was a lot of preparation for a hurricane, you know, like it's 72 hours out, it's 48 hours out, it's changed course, it's this, you know, earthquake just happens. And I feel
Right.
like I felt a lot in when my marriage ended that it was sort of like a natural disaster. Like, you know, you wake up and you think you're having a normal day, and then your whole life falls apart. And what are you going to do next? And I do think some of the safety training that I've done over the years, you know, being a school teacher and working on a cruise ship and thinking about drills is, you know, first you have the full emergency part, and then you have the what do we do now? And in terms of resilience, I'd say some of the things we've already talked about, obviously therapy, family, friends, support network, all of that made a huge difference to me. And I think looking for perspective that, you know, what's the difference between a problem and an inconvenience? Like having been in Nepal at the time when they only had 12 hours of power a day, and most of it was not at the right time if you wanted to have lights on to do your schoolwork, you know, that like I tried to remember what were real problems. And yes, I had to find a new job, and um you know, my physically, emotionally, I felt very broken. Fortunately, physically, I wasn't broken. Like I could work. I didn't have a job, but I had capacities. I guess I tried to focus on the steps that I could do instead of so much of what I couldn't do. I mean, definitely I cried. I was lonely. It was hard, but reaching out for support, I think, is one of the things that made the biggest difference for me.
Yeah. And that in itself is brave. And yet you call your book Brave-ish. Why Brave-ish?
It's very funny. Quite a few people have taken issue with the title of my book. They're like, "You are brave." And I'm like, "Okay, thanks. I didn't feel brave." So, one
Mm.
of the things that I heard the most when I left my relationship was people kept saying to me, "You're so brave. You're so courageous." And I heard it so many times and it did not resonate with me at all. I kept looking the word up in the dictionary because I was like, maybe I'm thinking of the wrong word. Maybe I don't understand the word. And yeah, I just called it bravish partially because doing the 50 things and writing about the 50 things, I quit so many times. I just kept hating the project and hating the idea, and it was too much and it was too upsetting and it was too embarrassing. And I mean, I wish, you know, in the movies, sometimes they have a scene where someone's in a jail cell and they make the hashtags, how many days they've been, you know, they're keeping track, like, am I
Yeah.
getting out soon? I wish that in my room where I was writing, I had taken a marking pen to the wall every time I called someone and said, this project's so dumb, I quit. Because it was a lot. And I think there was some joy in quitting, like, haha, I don't have to do this anymore. But also there was a freedom, like, you know, I could pick whatever I wanted. If I didn't want to do it, I didn't have to do it. But there was also it's a great space of commiseration and misery. I'm like, this project's stupid. I'm not gonna do it anymore. And then people will try to one of my friends I called and she said, listen, I love you very much. Which side am I on? Am I convincing you you're right or you're wrong? Do you want to do it? You don't want to do it. I don't care. I'll convince you. I'm with you. What am I debating? And I was like, oh, you're such a good friend.
Yeah. She's like, I'm with you. I just need to know what you need.
She's like, I'm not sure which day it is. Is it the day where you're like, yes, I'm going back? Or you're like, no, I hate it. I'm like, how about let me hear both and then I'm going to pick.
Right. That's great. We all need a friend like that. When you were traveling all around, and as you look back on all of your travels, and I'm sure you're not done, I'm sure you're still going places. Do you have a favorite place? Do you have a least favorite place? Is there a story you want to share about any of that?
Most of the places I've been, I can't wait to go back. I am especially underwater. Scuba diving is definitely my most favorite thing. I love to be underwater. And just for anybody that's right now thinking I'll never go scuba diving, I was such a terrible scuba diving student that when we actually went to the open water, my instructor brought an extra instructor because he was worried I was going to be so much trouble underwater.
That's hilarious.
But I was fine, and I've been fine ever since. But some people need more time. You have to be sensitive to how people learn. So anywhere underwater, I love Bon Air, Mexico. I just went diving in Loreto, Mexico. Jacques Cousteau called it the aquarium of the world. I mean, did you know you could see blue-footed that's a hard one to say. Blue-footed boobies in Loreto, Mexico. I saw them in the Galapagos and I loved them, but I didn't know it was so much closer to me. So that's one of the things I love about traveling is you go someplace and you find out, wait, there's more excitement here.
There's always more to discover, especially underwater. I mean, they just talk about how there's so much there that we don't even know about, especially as they go down deep. I find it really fascinating. I have a son who really likes watching things about, the phosphorescence, and it's so cool.
Have you
Everything that's
gone
under
to
there.
see it?
No, I'm not a scuba
Oh,
diver. My dad is, but I'm a
but
snorkeler. I have not
but
gone
sh-
that far down.
but you don't have to. But you can go in Puerto Rico to see the bioluminescence with kayaks.
I know. We were in Puerto Rico in March on a retreat, and we were going to do it, but it was one of those we had to do it on a specific day, and we'll have to do it next time. But yeah, we
You can
went to
even
Dorado Beach instead.
Dorado Beach is amazing,
Oh my gosh, I know, so cool.
but you can even see bioluminescence here in California.
This is what I've heard. Yes, is it in Monterey? We live very close to Monterey. Like,
I would have to look it up, but I know that I've seen it many, many places. I know there's something with the ostracots. I can't wait to go back to Bon Air and see. But the bioluminescence you can see in a lot of places, and you do not have to be a scuba diver. You can see it kayaking, you can see it snorkeling. You definitely can see it.
yeah. Yes, we should do this. I know. We've even been in Thailand where they did the whole thing, and then we just did it because our kids were little, and it was like, I don't know. We go to Thailand. We went to Thailand a lot, but we never did that. We have to do it. This is going to be on my list. I need a list
Listen,
of 50 things.
listen, if you're lucky, you get more chances.
Yeah, that's true. I like that. So, as you look back on all this, and as you've written your book and you're about to launch it out into the world, what are you hoping people come out of reading your book with? What is your message you're trying to give to people? Um, and yeah, do you feel good about like that message that you're giving?
Thank you. Yes, it's very exciting that people will be able to hold my book in their hands. It will also be a digital book and an audiobook. My message, I think that one of the most important things I realized in this process is that small steps add up to something
Mm.
and that things might take time. I saw a graphic once and it was of grass and the person was leaning down screaming at the grass grow as if that would help. And so it really stuck with me. I used to plant with my students when I was a science teacher. And if one of my kids had come into class and dug up the seeds to see if it had roots yet, I'd have been like, what are you thinking? Like, we put the seeds in the dirt, we water the dirt, we give it sun, and we wait. And then I was trying to rebuild my life. And I was like, it's not done yet. My friend was like, it's been like 4.5 days. Like, okay, it's not done yet. And I never forgot that image of the yelling at the grass to grow because some things just take time. And if you stay and if you take the small steps, like my dad's very funny. And so my YouTube is very close now to 2 million views and I have about 50,000 to go. And I was like, oh my gosh, Dad, it's not 50. I have 50,000 more. And my dad said to me, oh, I remember when you were so excited you had 100 views. I said, yeah, I was pretty excited. Because then I remember when you had 1,000 views and you were like, wow, 1,000's way more than 100. I said, so relax. It will happen.
That's so good. When I was on that retreat, I was mentioning in Puerto Rico in March in the rainforest, another place they have sound machine recordings of literal, actual recordings of sound machines and the frogs, which I grew up in Venezuela. So same frogs, very, very similar sounds at night.
I call it coochie, coo, coo, coo. What's the frog's name in Puerto
I'm
Rico?
for some reason drawing a blank of how
anyway, go on.
Puerto Rican but they frogs sound so nice. In fact,
so nice.
When my granddad came to visit in the 80s, he came from the States to visit us in Venezuela, and he had like a tape recorder, and he recorded a cassette tape of the frogs so he could take it back and listen at night, which this is pre-sound machine, but they are really wonderful. But as we were on this retreat, one of the things we did in that exercise was to decide what we wanted to bury in our lives, what we wanted to water, and what we wanted to plant. And we actually went outside. They gave us a plant, and we planted a plant in the grounds of where the retreat was, and we watered it. And the whole experience of it all was just very impactful. And it's something that, you're an educator. So when you do things that are tactile and you experience it, it's more likely to stick into your brain and you're kind of embody it in a different way. And so that was something I really took away from that time is, life throws us curveballs. You didn't realize your marriage was going to end. You didn't, people might have a tsunami that hits them or a hurricane or fires in Hawaii or whatever. Things happen, natural disasters happen, relationships end that we think are going to last forever. And we have choices, right? So some things just need to be buried, and other things in our lives that we want to bear fruit, we can continue to water those, but it's like grass. You can't expect it to grow overnight. And then sometimes we just need to plant something new. And that's kind of what I see that in your journey. And it's very special. And I'm so glad you wrote this book. And I think that your message is really important and impactful. And we need more stories of women, both in podcasting and in the Barbie movie is like making records, not because it's a toy, people, but because it's a story that centers a woman, right? We need more stories of women. And so thank you for writing yours down. It is brave-ish. And
thank you.
I won't label you brave if you don't want to be labeled brave.
No, I could be brave now, but the book's brave-ish. It's okay. I'll take anything.
Yeah. All right, you're brave.
It's fine.
Because I see you as brave, but I didn't want to put that on you.
No, you put it on me. Yeah. I'm taking it.
That's awesome. Yes.
I need to make shirts. That's one of my jobs. I have to think about shirts. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And maybe you could get, is it Pixar that did the movie Brave? Maybe you can kind of do a little partnership with the Brave. She's brave. You're brave-ish.
I love that. I'll take anything. Yes, bring it.
That's right.
I travel around the world with a hula hoop. So I tagged Mattel in a few things. I'm like, hey, I'm a 50 plus with a hula hoop. What about that?
I love it so much. No, thank you so much for just bringing your joy and your pain and your sorrow and your suffering and your adventure and your resilience all into this conversation. It's just so beautiful to have it all just put together in this book. And I'm really excited for people to read it. So how can people find you, your writing, and your book?
Thank you. So the book is available everywhere books are sold: Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart, Target. But the thing I tell people is the best idea is we want to support and help our local bookstores. So call up your favorite local bookstore and order the book and tell them you will come in the store to pick it up. Don't have it sent to you. Go to the bookstore, because when you walk in, you're going to be amazed. There's so many treasures. So that's how you can find the book. And then all over the social media, I am at Lisa Niver. So from TikTok to YouTube to Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, Threads, you name it, I'm there. And I also have a website called We Said Go Travel, and I have a podcast, Make Your Own Map.
Love it. Thank you so much for sharing yourself with us today. Thank you for all the ways that you're putting out just beauty into the world and showing us the world through your travels. It's a very special thing that we are so here for on the A World of Difference podcast. So we're going to have you hang out for one more question. I'm going to ask you about your experience traveling as a woman, because if you're anything like me, I get a lot of people be like, why are you traveling solo to those places? It's dangerous. So we're going to get your perspective on that in our Patreon community. But thanks so much for being with us today. And may this book cause more people to come up with lists of 50 challenges in their lives and just for a whole movement of people being brave.
Wow, thank you so much. And thank you for having me on the podcast. And I hope everybody gets to listen to our special question next.